Isabelle. Welcome to Vet Inspo Talks. I'm excited to have you, a PhD candidate in the animal behavior group, on the show today, where we'll dive into how to obtain a PhD degree, professional development, and some tips and tricks for applying. So tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, so like you said, I'm a fourth-year candidate. I'm in the animal behavior grad group. So I just passed my qualifying exam.
Congratulations.
Thank you. At the end of 2022, so it's been only barely a year now. So yeah, what I currently study for my PhD is abnormal behavior in dairy cattle.
Oh, nice.
So my dissertation is looking at the cognition and the welfare of captive housed dairy cattle.
Yep.
So I get to work with the cattle on campus, which is really cool.
That's cute.
Yeah, they're so adorable, and they're just lovely animals to work with. I had never worked with them before Davis, so that's been really cool. But before I got into getting a PhD and everything like that, I was an undergrad here at Davis. So I got my Bachelor's of Science degree in animal science, like you, in 2019. So I graduated not too long ago, although it feels like a decade ago. So I got my degree in 2019. And originally when I came to Davis, like many animal science undergrads, I wanted to be a vet. So I, in all of undergrad, worked as a veterinary technician.
Oh, wow.
So I worked as a vet tech for 2 years in a small animal clinic. And got a ton of different hands-on experience, as many of your listeners and you definitely know. And I really liked it. I loved the veterinarian that I worked for. I loved the clientele. But I didn't love the work itself. I loved working with the animals, but there was something about the actual job that I was like, I feel like I should like this more. And I just really didn't. So I was like, maybe I just don't like the small animal world. Maybe I need to try different species.
Yeah.
So then I worked as a large animal technician, and I was like, this is really cool, but I also don't really love it. And so I worked as a surgical tech, because I was like, maybe surgery will be really cool. And it was, but I also was like, this is still not it doesn't quite tickle my brain is the way I describe it. So I reached out to a TA and was like, hey, I'm really interested in animal science, but I don't really know what to do with that, because I clearly, something about veterinary science doesn't quite work for me. And she was like, oh, you should come work for me over summer. I'm doing a project at the dairy. And then kind of the rest is history, which I'm glad to talk about more. So yeah, that's kind of my background in animal science and kind of where I got started. So,
that's amazing. There's so many opportunities with this animal science degree that people can just explore with, and it's amazing. So the first question when talking about obtaining a PhD degree like you are currently doing, how does one know that they want to go through this PhD path?
So I think a big part of it is, are you interested and willing to do research? So research is the fundamental aspect that encompasses your PhD, at least a PhD in science. I can't speak for a PhD in English or something like that. So essentially for a PhD, you have to write 3 chapters, and these chapters all need to be distinct in what the different experiments you're running are, but they also have to tie together. So you kind of have to think about what is your overarching message that you want, and then what are the actual experiments that you want to run.
Right.
So when thinking about getting a PhD, you really want to think about what are the questions that you would be interested in studying, because you have to consider that you'll be studying these questions for potentially 6 years almost. You can do a PhD in 4 years in theory, but not to discourage anyone. But often it's about 5 to 6 years for most people. So when you're thinking about trying to do a PhD, I think one of the big things is are you interested in research? Are you capable and willing to put in so much time to design an experiment, to get interns to work for you, to run the experiment, to analyze it, to write it? It's so much work. So I think had I not had research experience before that, applying to a PhD, I would have been so shell-shocked about just what the entire experience is and whether or not I could succeed in it. All of those things I think would have been impossible. So I think definitely making sure that that's something that you're interested in. And then another big thing is considering funding. So funding.
That's important. Yeah, I know.
Super, super important. And something I don't think that a lot of graduate students necessarily know until they start, which is, in my opinion, a major disservice to the students. I think we need to be better about educating them before they commit to it. But one of the big things is, do you actually have funding to sustain you through each quarter? And the way that happens is either you get paid by your PI or your primary investigator, which would be your boss, essentially, the faculty member that's advising you, or you get paid by TAing, so being a teaching assistant. So for me, I don't get any funding from like external sources, and then I really like teaching. So for me, TAing is kind of like an easy, like, oh, of course, I'll just TA. So I've TA'd for 12 consecutive quarters now. Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so it's been a lot. I've TA'd. I guess every quarter you've been here, actually,
I know, yeah.
I've TA'd.
Yeah.
Because we both started, fall of 2020, right?
Yeah.
So I think thinking also when you want to get a PhD is how are you going to be funded by your university?
That's
I think
important.
that's a big one to know. Because if you hate teaching and you don't have funding, then you're kind of in a tricky situation.
Right.
So those, I think, would be two big things.
And now you were talking a lot about your previous research experiences that you had. How are you able to obtain these?
My previous research experiences that I've had were all obtained by me essentially bugging other graduate students and being like, hey, I would love to work for you.
Yeah.
So my first time I talked to a TA that I had who did like embryology research with cattle.
That's cool.
And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So I emailed him and he was like, yeah, you can come work in my lab. So I worked in his lab for like 3 months. And I liked it, but I didn't love the like microscopic cellular level stuff. I was like, I don't know if that is exciting to me. I don't want to sit on a bench all day and like do all this stuff with pipettes. Like, obviously it's really important, but not for me. So then I reached out to another graduate student that I mentioned previously, and learned that she was working with cattle and like actually working with the animals. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that sounds really fun because I have so much experience working hands-on with animals. That's definitely something I'm into and experienced with. So I approached her. At that point, I was already like a junior or a senior. I can't remember which, but I had already had a lot of experience, and I was really just trying to show her how committed I was to like trying new things and really getting exposure. And I think for her that was important because she was looking for a research assistant that could commit the time.
Go. Yeah.
So then I ended up working for her for the entire summer. Oh, wow. It was kind of it was a really crazy experience because it was a 24-hour study. So we would be out with the calves at like 4 a.m. or
That's commitment.
Yeah. And it was super fun because again, the calves are so cute and like even when you're out there at 4 a.m., they're just adorable. So it makes it all fun. But I got a ton of exposure to like experimental design and like how to actually like manage a team of interns and how to make decisions on the fly about these kind of questions when you're running an experiment. So that was super cool. And I think had I not had that experience, I definitely would not be getting my PhD right now.
Oh, wow.
It was very formative, like super inspirational, and also kind of threw me in the deep end a little bit with like being exposed to every possible thing that could go wrong or go right with a project.
That's great though, yeah.
Yeah. So, and honestly, again, like I would have never gotten that experience had I not just emailed my TA and been like, hey, your stuff sounds really cool. Can we meet? And she said yes. So I think my encouragement to current undergrads or people interested in that is just email a grad student who's currently doing work on something you're interested in and something you'd have time to commit to. And then see where it goes from there. And then I've been lucky enough now that I'm on the kind of flip side of it.
The other side, yeah.
I've worked with, I think I've had about 30 undergraduates now that have worked for me.
That's amazing, yeah.
And a handful of which have gone on to vet school, grad school, and then one I'm currently mentoring that's starting her master's in the fall under the same, in the same department.
That's nice.
And so I'll be working with her now as a colleague, which is really cool. So I would say really just the exposure comes from putting yourself out there and reaching out. Otherwise, I'm sure there are things like job applications online where sometimes labs will put up like an offer for an internship or something. Yeah, exactly. But I'd say the more successful mechanism towards getting like an internship or volunteer or something like that would be, to just
say the same thing.
Yeah. Just email people and they'll respond, hopefully. If not, email them again.
Exactly. Like, keep bothering them. It's fine.
It's totally
and if
fine.
they see that you're super passionate about it, they'll respond.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as you're like professional and polite, like they'll respond to you eventually. Sometimes people are busy. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome advice for our listeners, for sure. Now, when talking about professional development, what resources have prepared you to become a researcher in the real world?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, just being exposed to a ton of other like colleagues that are way more mature and older than I am have really taught me a lot of the ways in which you work with faculty, work with undergrads, work with people in the industry that we're involved in. So like, for example, for me, it would be working with dairy farmers.
Right.
So for me, I think other people have really been an amazing resource for learning how to do that. And then meeting one-on-one with my boss early on, a lot of our meetings really kind of encompassed a lot of that. Like, how do you actually email with faculty in a way that's, like, effective?
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, which are things you wouldn't necessarily think you, like, need to formally do, but are so helpful. And I definitely impart that to my undergrads. It's like, here are my words of wisdom from what I've learned.
Yeah.
And then other resources are things just like attending like meetings and workshops and things like that. So I try to participate in a lot of like DEI workshops or like teaching workshops to learn like pedagogy for how to teach undergrads.
Oh, nice.
Or just different ways I can kind of get involved in supporting undergrads and other communities. Going to conferences has been another one that's like
that's
super...
gonna be my next question.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Then I'll elaborate more for the next question. But yeah, I don't know that there are any like formal resources per se that I've used. Like I've definitely just mostly learned through trial and error of like working with other people to teach me. I definitely think the workshops, though, on, like, professional development through the university, there's other workshops, like, so I'm part of an animal welfare network.
Oh, nice.
And it's just a big amalgamation of, like, veterinarians and animal welfare scientists and students and all kinds of other people. And they host, like, networking opportunities, professional development courses that I've attended. So that would be another way, depending on the field that you're going into.
Oh, that's really resourceful, yeah.
So that's been, and they're always free, which is super nice. Obviously, like, there are paid ones, too, but grad students, so I don't do those ones. But, yeah, I think those are definitely some ways that I try to just teach myself as much as I can on how to be successful and then hopefully, again, pass on that information to other students. But
yeah, that's really great. I mean, all the resources that are available for you, and then you put your foot in the door saying, hey, I want to learn more, and that's really great. Yeah. And then again, have you ever attended research conferences, and what have you gained from attending them?
Yeah, I've been to a couple. I can kind of give you the TLDR on each of them. I think the coolest one I've ever been to was actually this past fall. So I went to Estonia, which is right next to Finland. And that one was for an International Society of Applied Ethology, or Applied Animal Behavior. And so that one I got to present my work at, which was super awesome. Got to go to a country that I never maybe would have had the opportunity to go to, fully funded by my research. Yeah. I got to go with a bunch of my lab mates, both present and former, which was, again, just an amazing like networking and just social opportunity to be with my friends and my peers who I work with. So that one was really cool. I got to listen to actually some like super world famous researchers give talks, which was just like very mind blowing. And like I was definitely like a little fangirl in the audience for some of them. And then getting to network with some of those people that I, again, probably would have never met had I not gone.
Yeah.
So people from Ireland, people from just all over the place. So that was a really cool one that I definitely encourage students, if they have the financial opportunities through their labs, to try to go internationally with their conferences. Yeah. And then I've been to some national ones. So I went to the Dairy Science Association conference in 2022.
Nice.
That one was in Missouri. It was very hot. But that one was really cool to actually get to network with more dairy science people. Yeah. Because really, mostly I'm interfacing with behavior and welfare people. I don't really get the dairy side as often. And that was a really cool opportunity to kind of actually get to know industry people, and hear more of the perspective from like the production side of things, which again, I'm biased in that I think of things from this like behavior lens, this welfare lens. And it's so helpful to my research, and I think to them too, to be able to exchange our different perspectives. So that was really fun, and I'll be going to that conference again this summer in Florida.
That's nice.
Yeah, so that'll be fun. I've never been to Florida, so that should be fun. And again, it's similar thing. I'm going to present some of my work, and then I'll be listening for the other days to all these other different talks. And then I went to a dairy cattle welfare conference last year that I presented a poster at in Texas, and that one was really interesting. And that one is unique in that it's not just academics. So usually conferences for research are mostly just faculty and grad students and folks like that. This one it's specifically designed to be faculty grad students, but there's also industry people. So we had people from like Fairlife Milk or like other dairy product places. And then we also have farmers that come to the conference, which again isn't something you would necessarily see at like a research conference.
Yeah.
And that was such a cool opportunity because we actually got to engage in like these big kind of group discussions, and you get to hear like from the actual people on the ground doing some of that work.
Right.
And that was really cool. I definitely wish more conferences had that kind of like holistic approach of like bringing in all of the people that are affected by it, not just like the faculty and grad students where we're like sitting at our desks doing a lot of this like writing and research, but not actually able to interface maybe with industry people, for example. So that was a really cool one as well. And I just, if you have the financial opportunity, or like if your boss is like, hey, you should go to this conference, even if you don't really want to go, I just recommend you should always go, because it's a great opportunity. Even if you don't love the conference, it's a great opportunity to just travel and open your mind view and
that's true.
Meet people and all kinds of things like that. But yeah, it's a great networking opportunity. Like I've never made so many friends or so many new colleagues like than I have in those 4 days that I was there. So it's definitely really been a fun part of grad school that I'm really grateful for, because I don't think I would have been to some of these places had I not.
If you didn't go.
Exactly.
Now you're talking about that, I actually just went to my first ever like national conference.
Oh, how exciting.
So it was really fun, and like you said, I got to network with so many people.
Cool.
I got to learn about their labs and if we do similar research and comparing our results.
Oh, that's
so definitely
cool.
Definitely recommend as well. That's a really great input. Yeah.
That's so cool.
My last question is going to be in regards to the tips and tricks for applying for grad school or PhD. If someone wants to go through this process, what do you think they should look out for when applying?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think my number one advice would be to look for a program based on the person that you want to work with. So I think your relationship with your PI, again, your boss that's overseeing your research, is something that I don't think I quite understood the importance of until I got into grad school. And luckily for me, I have a very wonderful relationship with my PI, but I certainly know a lot of people, both at UC Davis and at other universities, that don't have great relationships, whether that be that it's negative or just like kind of neutral. I think having a positive relationship with that person that you're going to have, they're going to read every word of every paper you write. They're going to sign off on every decision you make for your research. They are so integral to every part of your work that if you don't like actively have a working relationship with them, you're really going to struggle. And I think I know so many people that have either dropped out of their PhD programs because of that, or just really struggled to finish. So I think making sure that you vet the person that you're seeking to work with, like, very well. And that just means, you should meet them multiple times before you actually apply to work with them. That might sound silly, but you'd be surprised. There are people that apply to work in our lab who have never even talked to our boss. Oh, wow. They just apply to work here. And I'm like, don't you want to meet her? So I'd say, like, meeting them and then talking to the grad students who are in the lab. They will tell you, don't come here, or, oh my gosh, it's lovely, or come here if your working style is XYZ. Because sometimes people are really great to work with if you're a perfectionist, but if you're not, then maybe you'll struggle. So I think that would be my number one advice is, would you get along with the PI? That will honestly make or break your experience. And then along with that is, like, how willing are they to be flexible with what you study? Like, if you start studying something and in the first year you decide, ooh, I don't really love, like, this isn't interesting, or this doesn't quite fulfill, like, what my needs are for this program, are they willing to let you switch? Or is this something like you are coming in to do this project and that's it? I think that's something important to know too. And then I think the environment and culture of the school is really important. So knowing that you're going somewhere that's going to support you as an individual, support your identities, and be able to provide resources that you need. So for example, for me, I struggle with my mental health a lot. And that's something I'm super vocal about with my students, with my PI, with my lab mates. I'm very straightforward about it. And I think had I gone to a university different than Davis that was more closed-minded about those things, or didn't give me the opportunities or access or accommodations, I probably would not have finished my PhD. I probably would have dropped out. And being able to have that support on all different aspects from my like personal team and my professional team, like being able to actually have that culture be so positive and helpful. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think I would have struggled much more than I would have at a baseline level. So and I know figuring that out is hard if you're not already here. Like I was already here, so I kind of could figure that out. But I think, again, talking to grad students who currently go to the school you're going to, or meeting with counselors that work at the university, whether that be like professional counselors or like mental health counselors, whoever, kind of getting a sense of like, is this an environment that I would be happy in, or is this city a place that I would want to live? Right. Yeah. I think people kind of understate how important that is for your mental health and ability to like succeed in a program that's gonna kick your butt, to say, for lack of better words. Like, it's very hard, and it's going to be so much work, and it's going to be wonderful if you can make the best of it. But if you can't, then it's going to, really push you hard. And I think knowing that the culture is going to support you and that the people are going to support you is such an important part. And maybe sounds like, oh, of course, that's so easy. Like, of course you should do that. But actually figuring that out before you go is so important. So I think that would be my other one.
And then what would you tell your younger self if you can go back in time, and why?
Ooh, I think, so little me wanted to be a vet since I was probably 5 or 6. Yeah. I always wanted to be a vet. My first word was dog. Like, I have been hardcore on this journey since day one. So I think if I could go back, I would tell myself, it's okay that you're not going to be a vet one day. Yeah. Not for lack of trying or ability. I could have gone to vet school. I just realized I didn't really want to, and that's okay. Because when I got to that point when I was like 21, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do for a living? Like, I'm a failure. There's no other job for me. I had this whole, not mental breakdown, but maybe, about like, oh my gosh, I thought I wanted to be a vet my whole life, and then now I'm not, and I don't know what to do. So I think I would go back and tell myself, like, look at all these other jobs that you could do that you would be so good at, that will still engage your brain in science and still allow you to help animals and focus on their well-being, but not have to do a job that will honestly make you really miserable. For me personally, it's just not for me. I have so many friends who it is meant for, and they're already vets and just having the most incredible experience. So I think, I would tell myself that that's okay. And then I would also tell myself to have a little more fun. I think I was always I've been so into school my whole life. Looking back, sometimes I'm like, I wish I just like let myself have more breaks and just like go do more fun things with my friends, or like take a weekend off sometimes. Yeah. Like, I think that's so important, and I'm so much better at that now. I'm really trying to work on my work-life balance, but I think that would be so helpful for me in the long run. Had I done that then, I think I would have been less stressed than I am now, like in my late teens. Yeah. Because I would have had the ability and skills to be like, that's enough work for me. I'm gonna take a break. So I've gotten good at that now, but mostly because of it's kicked me in the butt enough that I had to. Every time. So I think that's what I would tell myself, and hopefully little me would listen and be like, okay, and maybe not work as a tech for 3 years and wonder why I didn't like it so much. It's a good question.
Well, awesome. And it's been great having you today on the show and, sharing your insightful knowledge with us. And then for the audience, thanks for watching, and see you next time on Vet Inspo Talks.